I wasn't nervous until Chris called me one day this week, and he said, "Are you nervous?" And I was like, "Not really." He said, "Really? You're not?" And then I started getting nervous. I didn't recall. I just want to say thanks for you guys coming out. Some of you have heard some of this information before over the past few months, and so just bear with me. It may be a little repetitive to you, but I still think it's pertinent to understanding what I foresee as Emmanuel's vision. And I'm a little hesitant in even using that term, vision, and say that I've got this grand and glorious vision. As I've gotten older in ministry, I realized that for a pastor to come in and just be given the freedom to do whatever he wants and have this great and grand and glorious vision without any input from the church is probably a little flawed. And so you'll see that when I talk about vision, it doesn't just, it's not just referring to what I think is going to happen under my leadership. It has a lot to do with the strengths of Emmanuel that are already in place here at this church. So I hope that you'll see it from that perspective. I want to start off by saying that, and I've said this a few times, that when I left my previous church in South Carolina, I honestly thought that I wouldn't be a senior pastor again, because we were in a church that we'd started and it actually grew faster than what we thought it would, which is a good problem to a certain extent. But in that process, Denise was working full-time, about 45, 50 hours a week, and I was pastoring a new church and getting everything in place. And after about 2 years, we realized it was a lot more than we could handle. We were completely stressed out. We didn't have any other full-time staff members, had a couple part-time guys. And I was pretty worn out, physically, spiritually, emotionally. And we felt about 2.5 years into that God was leading us somewhere else. We had a hard time giving that ministry up, because during that process we bought land, 17 acres of land, and we moved into a new building, and we didn't move into a building we built, we moved into a bigger rented facility. And so we had a hard time realizing that God was really moving us to a different position. And so in that process, we finally, about the third year after I went to Africa, we began to pray that God would just lead us wherever He wanted us to go, and we were very open to wherever God wanted us to go. And we never dreamed we would end up in Pullman, Washington, all the way from South Carolina. We were actually more open to the mission field being in Africa than we were going across country. We just thought it was kind of odd that God would send us this far across country. But when I came here, it has been a wonderful time the past 7 years, working with small groups, working with our staff, and working with missions. It's given me the opportunity to really work with a lot of things that I'm passionate about. And even when Mark left, he and I had a conversation. He asked if I was interested in the job, and I said, "No way, I'm not interested." And the reason being is because I perceived this job being similar to the job that I'd had before, where I was making every little decision. I was, plus having to speak every Sunday and do all this work. But as I got into the transitional part of this job, I began to understand. I've already worked with the majority of our staff for the past few years, but I began to see how well we worked together, and that we were taking more of a team approach. We divided responsibilities, and that has worked real well. It's been neat to be able to share the pulpit with Eric and Andy and Bob, and so I've seen how this approach really works. And as I've gotten into this process, I realized that the reason God has led me here and led me to apply for this position is because He showed me that it's not like other positions I've been in. I know as a pastor there's decisions that need to be made, but if I had a dream job, this would kind of be it, because it gives me an opportunity to work with highly qualified staff, and where I don't have to make every little decision, to make all the decisions on my own, but we're working as a team to accomplish God's purpose. And if you read the packet of information, one of the questions is describe your style of leadership. And if I had a word to describe my style of leadership, it would be teamwork. And because I believe strongly in that. I don't believe one man should take on the sole responsibility of the church. I think that leadership should be shared. and that people use their giftedness to accomplish the work that God has given them to do. And so, saying all that, I want to kind of move and segue into the vision part of this. On your handout, I just wrote these notes actually a few months ago for the pastor search committee as I thought and prayed through what I would talk about when it came to vision. And there's two quotes there that kind of set the stage for what I would talk about when it comes to vision. And the reason those quotes are important to me is because I think as we begin to talk about vision for Emmanuel, I think it's critical that we talk about defining what is important to us, defining what is valuable to us, or our values. In the past, since I've been here at Emmanuel, we kind of have at times a smorgasbord approach. Whatever we think works, we just do it. And and there's nothing wrong with that to a certain extent. But as I've studied church growth and studied other churches I came from, the churches that seem to last long-term and grow for long-term consistently are churches that focus. They know what their values are. And the two quotes I put down there, one is, what should we leave out so that the most crucial can stand out? And that's a critical question I think our church needs to ask at some point. What is the most crucial things about Emmanuel Baptist Church? And then one of my favorite authors, Henry Blackaby, from the study Experiencing God, which completely transformed my life back in 1999, says, God is always at work around you. Once you know where He is working, you will adjust your life to join Him where He is working. And as I thought about those two quotes and thought about Emmanuel and our vision, I began to think through and pray through what are the values of our church? What are the things when I look around that I see are areas where God is definitely working? And I just wrote down some of these. These are examples on your sheet. And I'm not going to go through all these, but these are things I see, areas I see where God is definitely working. And for example, take for example strong families. I think of the number of kids that have been coming to Awana, 170 to 200 a couple of weeks ago. I think of our youth program. I think of the young families that God has given to us. It would not be very wise of us to ignore the fact that God has placed young families and families in general right in front of us to be a part of strengthening the lives of those families and those couples and those children. And so I think it is critical for us, and I'm just using one of these because I can't spend 10 minutes on each of these values, but I think this is critical because I see this as a very strong value in our church. I think it's critical that in the next few years that we begin to pray and think through, if God has given us all these families and children and youth, how are we going to organize to make sure that someone who comes into our church as a child is discipled all the way up to from cradle to grave? What are we doing about it? And so I think that's a critical value. And I'll give you an example of a couple of things we've already put in process since our staff leadership team retreat. One of the things we did, one of my main responsibilities was premarital counseling. And so I would meet with 5 or 6 couples each year. And one of the things we decided to do is we identified 5 married couples in our church that we have given them material, met with them a couple of times, and we are using them to mentor premarital couples. And the reason we're doing that is because what I found is that in counseling people one-on-one in my office, or two-on-one in my office, they can learn some things, but I think they learn better by the married couples that are already here and have strong marriages. And so we're going to plan on mentoring those premarital couples. And so we're actually starting that this coming fall. As soon as the first couple calls the office and say, hey, on premarital counseling, we'll pass them off to a couple. They'll meet with a pastor the first and the last meeting, but 6 meetings in between, they will be mentored by another married couple. And we've talked to couples about this. They're excited about it, so it's pretty exciting to see that happen. Another thing we're doing, Michelle Milkey's going to be our marriage encouragement coordinator. Did I get the title right, Michelle?
As far as we
know, we kind of go back and forth on the title. But Michelle's responsibility is going to be she's going to be doing 2 or 3 things. One is she's going to be preparing or planning date nights every so often. we're going to do that consistently, where couples come to church and they will have like a 5-minute study time, a video, or somebody comes in and talks, and then we'll give couples like 2 questions that they take out on a date with them. And so it's going to be very intentional. It's not going to just be you drop your kids off, you go somewhere, and hopefully you have a meaningful conversation. We're doing things to take steps to help couples have meaningful conversations on a consistent basis. So those are a couple of things that we're doing. Other things we're trying to do is post-marriage counseling, to meet with couples after they're married so that we can follow up with them, because a lot of couples come into marital counseling, they think everything's going to be great and that we're not going to have the same problems that you did. And so sometimes I'll pose a question, well, call me in 5 years and let me know how that's going for you. And usually it doesn't take 5 years, usually it's like 2 months. And that's in all honesty. And so couples are desiring to meet with married couples again for post-marriage counseling. So that's an area I see as very, very valuable to our church. And I think it's critical that we spend time discussing that and having a plan as to how we're going to strengthen families. It's not just married couples, but it's children, it's youth. My goal would be that in 5 years or so that we would have a plan as to how we're going to disciple kids, but also how are we going to disciple and transition kids from childhood to youth, and then from the youth to adulthood. Because what happens is in a lot of churches we lose kids as they get into the teenage years. And so I would love to see us develop a plan that would work for us. So that's one of the key ones. Another one for us, I think, 2 on there, is 2 at the bottom, impacting the world, which is missions. I've said many times that we, as a church, send more people on the mission field or mission trips than any church I've ever been in. I don't know if you realize how unique that is. Bonnie and I were talking about that this morning, about if you could just talk to some other pastors and church members in the Northwest and just kind of quiz them on how many people they send to the mission field each year on trips. You would probably be surprised comparatively how many Emmanuel sends. They have 8 teams this past year go to the mission field for a trip. It is pretty astounding to me. And so it's obvious God is at work in missions. God's brought mission field to us through Bob and Colleen's ministry, internationals. And so I would like to see us develop a plan, a better plan for missions. Do we need to be more strategic in focusing on a certain area of the world? We talked about this with the missions team many times, and I've been thinking and praying through that. Should we develop partnerships with certain areas of the world, certain missionaries that we're in contact with? And so we want to develop that. Bob is doing an excellent job. He kind of took my job as the missions team leader during this transitional period, and they've done an excellent job of encouraging people to be involved, of supporting people as they go on mission trips, and they give away the money every time they need it, I think, just to different people who request. So we are doing an excellent job of missions. The other thing that I've seen in the past few months, especially since Anna Clemens offered the class, Whole in Our Gospel, Sarah's going to be leading that this fall. But since that class especially, we've seen more people rise up with a heart for ministry, not just in our community, but around the world. And that's the reason we're doing this focus in September, is to help focus people more on actively being involved in serving the world. And you see that through the lives of these great people we've been talking about over the course of September.